But now we're living in an economy where everything is already digital, and all of a sudden you add this layer of generative AI on top. So there's almost no barrier for that to be stopped and to be slowed down. Maybe regulation, and maybe it should be, but other than that, there's very little things that are holding it back. So I think that this will be one of the biggest shifts in financial services that we've ever seen.
A new episode of FinScale will be available in a few days. Solène Niederkorn and her guests will reveal new initiatives transforming the world of finance. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. On FinScale, today I have a conversation with Bert Boerman, one of the co-founders of governance.com. Hi, Bert.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining me for this, one of the first video recording that I do on the podcast. I'm very glad that you accepted my invitation.
No, definitely. I feel honored. Thank you.
So, Bert, we know each other for a while. I remember when you launched your company, it was almost 10 years ago, if I remember correctly.
More than 10 years, yeah.
More than 10 years. And we met when I was in RegTech, working for Phenology at that time. So we know each other, but I would like you to quickly present yourself to the audience and people listening and watching us.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Bert Boerman. I am one of the founders, together with my twin brother, actually, of governance.com, which we founded back in 2014. So a little bit over 10 years ago now. And my background is banking. So I used to be depository head at ABN AMRO, and I was in corporate banking and institutional clients. And that's also a little bit why I came up with the idea for governance, because I desperately needed what we ended up creating.
So what was the genesis? And is the idea was initially to launch this with your brother?
Yeah, we did. So we were actually, at the time, we were running a sort of a app development business together next to our day jobs. Mostly out of just interest of what was happening at the time with HTML5 and all kind of new technologies that were in the market. And so initially Rob helped me to create a system that I needed to do my job at ABN AMRO. And that kind of snowballed into a business idea later on. And then in 2014, we decided to take this step to make the big jump into entrepreneurship. It
was in Luxembourg already at that time?
Yeah, so I was in Luxembourg. My brother was always in the Netherlands, but nowadays that distance doesn't really matter anymore, because you can, especially since COVID, everybody has realized how easy it is to work remotely with each other. But since I know my brother pretty well, being my twin, it was even easier for us.
I can imagine. So I was interested maybe just to take 7 or 8 minutes to go back to the launch of governance.com, and that you maybe explain to us what was the initial use case that you've been working on. And and over the time, how did you adjust this use case to adapt to the specific needs of your clients?
Yeah, the initial use case was very much based on what I needed when I was still a banker. So my last function at ABN AMRO was I was head of depository bank, which essentially in Luxembourg means that you have an oversight function over very complex investment funds. And that's especially when you look at alternative investment funds, like real estate funds, private equity, these structures, they tend to get very complex by themselves because of the holding structures. And a depository is supposed to be able to perform oversight over everything that is happening inside the fund, regardless of its complexity. You have accounts, you have movements, you have transactions. And so that's very difficult, and also because of the type of assets that you're monitoring, this was not possible to do this in traditional banking systems that were much more focused on custody, so custody holding of financial instruments inside a custody chain. And there, I think the market was already pretty well equipped. But then all of a sudden, if you try to do private debt or real estate or private equity, then that doesn't fit in your banking systems. These banking systems, that's what we typically refer to as legacy software. there's nothing wrong, by the way, with legacy software because they were programmed in an age where adaptability was much less necessary. But they're super solid, so they will never break as long as you don't try to make them do things that they're not intended for.
Yeah, so not so agile.
Yeah, absolutely. And so all of a sudden we were supposed to do different things, different kind of controls, different type of assets, and we couldn't do that in the system. So like everybody else on the market, we did that in spreadsheets. Initially that was okay. We used to say to the regulator, we have a very sophisticated spreadsheet solution, and that was kind of acceptable at the time, but not so much anymore. So I needed a system, and I started brainstorming because with my brother about ideas that I had, but like what if all the data was sufficiently connected and you could just navigate down the chain of these holding structures, and you could automate checklists and controls. That would be massively helpful. And if we would add on top of that the possibility to connect documents to controls, then that would be extremely helpful, would save a lot of time, but also if we would get a regulatory inspection, we would be much better prepared. And that was kind of the idea of governance before it became governance, and we ended up implementing that, just a very simple version of that in my job when I was still a banker. And then ultimately, a couple of years later, that became actually the genesis, indeed, of governance.
So you mentioned depository banks. Actually, when you launched a fund, and with my clients, I realized that very few, when they are first-time manager, they don't realize all the different stakeholders you have when you create such funds. You could maybe help us understand now, with the evolution of governance, what typology of clients you serve currently, and what is the use of the tool for each of those typology of clients.
Yeah. So our clients are fund service providers. So they are mancos and alternative investment fund managers, the depositaries and depository banks, and central administrators. So basically, those are the main three big parties that make an investment fund function, and they do different things because, for example, depository has to do cash flow monitoring, has to do asset verification. A Manco will have to do, for example, NAV calculation and all kind of other controls. A central administrator, their focus will be more on the actual fund accounting and on the onboarding of investors, for example, and keeping the register of the investors. But at the end of the day, what they all have in common is that they all serve the fund. They all have fund data that they need to maintain, that they need to connect, and they all need to perform controls, and they need to be able to evidence what controls they did when and what information was available. So what we actually realized is, we started in depository banking because that was the use case that I was trying to solve for myself. And then we very quickly realized that all these problems, that all these fund service providers are just different flavors of exactly the same problem. It's data problem, it's a control problem, it's audit trail. And so over time, governance has become more broad and started catering for a really wide range of activities in the fund, but always focused on compliance and control.
Interesting.
Hello everyone, I'm stepping in for a minute to thank you for being by my side for nearly 5 years. This show fuels my own reflections on the projects I support, whether it's with entrepreneurs or investors in France, Luxembourg, or across Europe. If you would like to discuss the challenges of transformation in investment, the creation or development of investment vehicles or companies, or even just the operational aspects, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and enjoy the show.
Okay, so Bert, you're no longer the CEO of governance. Now you have another CEO. So you're no longer in the operations, the day-to-day of governance, and you have more time to think about other areas and maybe to have a fresh eye on what is happening in the financial sector. So I know this is something you've been diving into these last months. So I would like to now open the chapter about artificial intelligence and the way it will have an impact on the fund industry more particularly.
Yeah.
I have already dived several times in my episodes, for instance, the use of AI in the domain of valuation, and it's so powerful, so interesting. I wanted to have your opinion on how do you see AI fundamentally changing the landscape of fund services in particular, and if we focus particularly in governance and compliance.
Yeah. So first of all, I've stepped back from the operational leadership of the company. That doesn't mean that I'm not operationally involved anymore. I'm actually very, very hands-on, but I'm much more focusing on developing and deepening our client relationships, and also to think a couple of steps ahead, like strategically what's coming on the market. AI is a very big topic for that, but also, looking at our current tools and implementations and configurations, how can we make it even easier for clients to do that? Obviously, me having such a long background as a company leader, I have lots of ideas about that, but very often when you are bogged down with your operational responsibilities, then you cannot do this blue ocean thinking anymore. So that's very much where I'm focusing our attention. And also, like, AI for governance is extremely important, but personally I find it a fascinating topic. I think that AI is going to set off, or the AI that we have now, because we've been talking about AI for more than 10 years, but there's a very big shift that happened last year, which is generative AI, and the kind of the adoption by the masses of generative AI. I think this will set off a new industrial revolution. So I was interested in that. Like, is that already in research? Is it already defined as a new era or something like that? That's and I found that, like, if you look back at the industrial revolution, so that the first one was the manual to mechanical work that lasted 80 years, a long time ago, and there were big productivity gains. But then the second one was mass production, and the time of that period was half of the previous one, but the productivity gains were 4 times as big as the first one. Mm-hmm. And then you got the third one, which was the transition to information economy, usage of computers, and digitalization of information. There again, the time of that period was shorter and the gains were even bigger. And then the fourth one, currently what most of the people are talking about, the fourth revolution, is the automation and AI. But for me, like I said, there's a clear shift what has happened since last year, because until recently, mid last year, AI was not available to the masses. It was this hypothetical thing of a robot sitting somewhere doing things in very complicated systems, whereas now everybody can log into their browser and you can have 5, 6, 7 different AIs that all do fascinating work for you. Mm-hmm. So I think this will be the biggest shift. Personally, I think it will be the biggest shift in productivity that we've ever seen. And also because if you look back at the past industrial revolutions, there was always barriers, like moving from manual to mechanical work. You need to build all these tools, right? Mm-hmm. So, or you need to come up with them, you need to invent them, then you need to build them, then you need to distribute them. But now we're living in an economy where everything is already digital, and all of a sudden you add this layer of generative AI on top. So there's almost no barrier for that to be stopped and to be slowed down. Maybe regulation, and maybe it should be, but other than that, there's very little things that are holding it back. So I think that this will be one of the biggest shifts in financial services that we've ever seen.
So I was mentioning use of AI in the domain of valuation, for instance. In the fund management process, we have a lot of complex processes, sometimes very cumbersome, complicated, long for the LPs, for instance. I think everyone listening to us has already been through one of the process, one of them being, for instance, the onboarding. So if we take the example of this, or even risk management, do you have concrete use cases that you see appearing that will massively change the way it's currently definitely done in the coming months and make the life much easier for the end users, let's say it like this.
Yeah, I think that indeed onboarding is a really interesting topic. I think it's super relevant for AI. The thing that we've been doing already for the last 10 years in things like, for example, investor onboarding, client onboarding, is part of the delays that you see. When you're a limited partner and you try to invest, you say, please take my 10 million euro into your fund, and it takes 4-6 weeks for you to get an approval to be allowed to invest all this money in a fund. It's just crazy.
Yes.
But the reason why that is that, first of all, the process itself is very heavy. There are many steps that these financial institutions need to take, a lot of hoops that you need to jump through, and there's with the regulatory scrutiny at an all-time high, you can't afford to get this wrong. So, I've seen onboarding processes where you get 8 signatures on a piece of paper that everybody has seen it and checked it. And so, but you don't really need AI for a lot of these things. So process automation is already a very big step ahead. But then you get to the second biggest one, and that's until now was a much harder one to solve, which is there's so much data. You have to look into so many things, and the data is ubiquitous. The data is all over the place. And whereas like 20 years ago, when you would onboard an investor, I mean, the amount of information that you could get about this person was fairly limited. But now you have sources all over the world. And now regulators also expect you to use those sources all over the world. So if I'm onboarding you into my fund, I need to screen you, I need to get your information, I need to identity verify you, then I need to analyze you, then I need to write reports about this, I need to get opinions from different people internally. And all these steps in the onboarding process, it's all taking information, analyze it, transform it into how the next party needs to see it, and then repeat the same thing. And this is where AI, generative AI, is unbelievably strong because it can summarize information more easily than we ever could. It can if you use agentic AI flows, it's one of the big developments now in AI. You can actually automatically schedule sequential steps where these AI bots are even talking with each other, and they're kind of feeding back. So you could even have a review bot that could review something that a research bot has done and send it back to the research bot if he didn't do his work correctly. So, but you still have the human in the loop. You still have the human taking the decision at the end, and that is something that is super important. And so for onboarding, I think that there's a lot of research on that as well. That there will lead to dramatic improvements. I think Deloitte or another company said that they expect up to 80% efficiency gains in these kind of processes. And there was also, for example, on screening, there was a research from Thomson Reuters, I believe, that they said, we believe that that's 50 or 60% reduction in false positives and increase in accuracy of results that you get back. So that you can consume much larger volumes of data, very quickly get to what is really essential for you as a human to look at, and then take your decision.
Okay, so I see your point, and I see that it will come fast, but you've met, and I've met also a lot of financial institutions over the years. Some have not even transformed themselves and make some tools available to their clients, and should have done that over the years. They didn't do it. So we have a lot of financial institutions that are not yet there in terms of transformation. Yeah. So how do you see them face these new challenge? And have you seen some financial institutions directly going to the AI tools and implementing AI tools while not having already transformed themselves internally?
Yeah, I mean, there are some knee-jerk reactions right now where people get kind of scared about how fast this thing is moving, and people say like, let's just implement the tool. But if you don't have like data governance, if you don't have that sorted out, and forget about AI. I mean, it's all about data at the end of the day. So it's super important that you have thought about these things. And what you mentioned also. With innovation in general, I think innovation in financial institutions is moving slowly, has moved slowly. Obviously, they are subject to a lot of regulation, a lot of scrutiny, which makes it scary to do this kind of, especially when you're working with unproven technologies or new technologies where nobody likes to go first in financial sectors. They like to let the others do it first, and then, well, if that works, then we'll follow. And that so far has always been a very good strategy. But right now, the things are moving so fast that you can't afford to sit back anymore. But that means that you need to form a strategy about this. What do you want to do with these things? And I mean, you also know how it is on boards. The number of boards that have really deep experience and expertise about digital technologies is very limited.
Yes.
So, and it's very difficult then to have a strategic discussion at board level about what you want to do with these tools or what these tools could even mean for your company. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what would happen, not just what is the risk of us doing it, but what is the risk of us not doing it? Because if all your competitors are adopting this and all of a sudden they're 50% more efficient and you don't follow suit, then you might not have a regulatory risk, but you have a competitive risk. So that's probably just as much of a business killer.
Yeah, and what I see, because I've been discussing this for, I would say, years. The fact that at board level there are not enough competences around technology, data, and things like that. I also fear that a lot of companies miss this revolution because they are focused on regulatory compliance, and with coming directives and regulations around AI, with DORA and things like that, fearing that board or reluctant to changes, and that we're really missing this, not only in Luxembourg, but I would say at EU level, globally. How do you see this?
So the AI Act, for example, is an interesting one. So a lot of people explain the AI Act as the EU not wanting to embrace AI. I think it's the opposite. The EU has said we want to embrace this, but we want to do it in a sustainable way. Mm-hmm. For this to be sustainable, there needs to be some guardrails around it, because especially when you're dealing with sensitive industries, like AI Act talks a lot about healthcare and finance being sensitive industries. If you get things wrong there, it can have a cascading effect on civilization, and so failure is not really an option there, and the risks are just too big. So I think that the backdrop of the AI Act makes a lot of sense. I do believe that's my personal conviction, is that we're moving too slow. Mm-hmm. Because yes, you have to have guardrails, because especially in financial sector, if stuff is not regulated, it brings out the worst in people. Mm-hmm. If you can move money around without any kind of controls, then unfortunately a lot of bad people will exploit that to do not so nice things. Mm-hmm. So you need to have these guardrails. But I think what the large companies, and most of these AI companies are not even in Europe. So they OpenAI is not EU, Meta is not EU, and they're all coming out with these tools. And Apple, the same thing. Recently, in the last weeks, all of them has said we are going to bypass the EU because it's too slow, but also, and that's very important, they don't get the right answers quickly enough. Because I think it's very important. It's not, regulation is not a problem, but uncertainty around regulation is a problem. Mm-hmm. And I think right now there's a lot of uncertainty in the market about, like, what does it mean? What is the risk that I get fined? Yeah. And what can I concretely do about that without completely changing my business model. I think that is currently slowing the adoption in the EU down, and I do think for competitiveness of the EU area, this could become a problem if we don't accelerate.
Mm-hmm. So if you could give a few piece of advice to the audience, people watching us, what would you say if you have, that kind of discussion at executive committee or board level of a financial institution? What would be the first things to do? Learn about this technology, have a sort of risk assessment of not doing it and doing it. Yeah. So what are the different steps that those financial institutions should go through?
Yeah, I think it's the first thing I would say is indeed learn about things, and not everybody needs to be an expert. But in the past, technology was an operational necessity and not more than that. Yes, you have computers, and computers they have some data in them, but right now it's a competitive differentiator. So just as much as an investment policy of a fund, for example. I mean, technology can impact it just as much as having the right or the wrong investment decision. So I think it's time for people to really to know a little bit more about it, and don't need to know everything. But it's my favorite topic right now. So I read every single day. I read at least an hour or 2 hours a day about this stuff. You have a lot of podcasts about this. You have a lot of interesting research papers. You can even use AI to summarize very long research to make it shorter for you so that you can digest it. So there's tools available for that as well.
And you add for a kid of 8, I do it.
Yeah, exactly. Explain it to me like I'm 8 years old. Exactly. That's a very good idea, actually. Yeah. But then also at least bring in somebody who has a really deep knowledge about it, because not everybody needs to be an expert, but everybody needs to have a basic knowledge about these things, and then one person that can kind of ask the really critical questions. I think at the board level that is really important. Then to set a strategy around it. So like, what do you want to use it for? So what are the drivers for you to look at this kind of technology? Is it competitiveness? Is it cost reduction, effectiveness, efficiency? So like, what are you trying to accomplish? And then based on that, as soon as possible, try things out. Okay. Like we always talked about sandboxes in the financial sector, as you know, and I think that idea that is really important, because you don't know if it's going to work for you unless you try it.
That's true.
I think that is very important. It's like try it, and then very quick, like the way startups work.
Yeah,
I think
fast iterate fast.
Iterate, absolutely.
Fast. Yeah. Okay, so concretely for governance, if we go back to governance, has it already changed something to you in the company or in the way you serve your clients? Do you have concrete use cases for people listening to us?
Yeah, so obviously we're taking it very seriously as well, and so we don't just want to implement the tool unless it's proven, because all our clients are dealing with very sensitive and private information, so you cannot just implement tools that are not proven. And also one of the things that the AI Act is requiring is explainability, human in the loop, privacy, ownership of data. So these things are very key to us, but we've been working on that already for the better part of this year. So we recently announced also that our own co-pilot is on its way. So we're currently already testing that out, and I think when people adopt sometimes technology, especially when it comes to AI, sometimes people have too high expectations, like this needs to solve everything immediately. And let it solve one thing first and then prove itself and then do the next thing. So that's the way we're approaching it as well. It's like the ultimate goal and the ultimate target that I believe that where we're going is that this will replace workflow automation completely. By using agents that are building workflows dynamically. But to get there, you need to take steps before that. The first steps for us is AI chatbots that help you to very quickly find information. So our Copilot will you can answer any question about any prospectus or any document or any data in the system, and it will instantly answer it. That's already massive. Then to help us to configure the platform as well, because we adapt our platform to our clients, and rather than doing it ourselves, we're already using AI to help us to do these configurations more quickly, which makes us more efficient. So those are the initial steps. So automate parts of the workflow, and then bit by bit make it more of a comprehensive end-to-end flow.
Okay, great. Perfect. So Bert, I guess you have a few podcasts to recommend or books in this domain. So what would you recommend to us?
Yeah, so the one that everybody should subscribe to is the AI Breakdown. It's a daily podcast, and it's just 15 minutes. I listen to it every day in the car to work. And it just gives you the main, so it's split in two, so it gives you the main headlines of what is happening in this field, and then it deep dives on one specific topic. Like, for example, this week California shut down a regulation on AI, vetoed it, and then they do like a 10-minute deep dive, like why. And so It's very interesting to know about the headlines and to kind of learn a little bit more about the underlying mechanics. So that's a really good one. If for Dutch people, there's this podcast called Pokey, which is hilarious. They try out all kind of different AI tools. And just yesterday night, I was on my way home late, and I was listening to it, and they were trying out the new chatbot of OpenAI, this instant voice mode. It's so funny because you can make it whisper, and it was very funny.
Yeah, I watched some YouTube videos I really loved a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
It's incredible. But it's available only in the US, correct?
In most of the world, but EU.
I tried it.
Yes,
it's not available in the EU, unfortunately.
But I got the tip that if you have a VPN, then you can actually access it for people that are interested to try it out.
Good idea. Okay, Bert, very interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today to the show. And I'll see you soon.
Yeah, really. Thanks so much for the invitation. It was fun.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to FinScale. Don't hesitate to subscribe to the newsletter on Substack to stay up to date with the latest innovations. You can also find the podcast in audio format on all listening platforms and in video format on YouTube. See you soon with Solène Niederkorn.